Sup suckers, it's your girl Janice. Today I'm going to be redrawing an old art piece of mine that I made back in 2019 when I was 14 years old. I was inspired to create this piece after seeing this drawing from Neck Arena. This was one of my favorite drawings at the time that I made this, but as time went on, I started noticing more and more things that bothered me, such as her head is too big, her neck is too thin, her arms are disproportionately skinny compared to the rest of her body, and I don't even know what's going on with this hand, and the drawstring on her shorts is just a one-dimensional line. Even aside from all the fundamental errors, I also want to better balance her chest to hip ratio to give her a more balanced hourglass figure, and I also want to give her muscles and abs, which would be a first for me. Now, without further ado, let's get started. This character is Buttercup, based on a scattered fanfiction I created of the anime reboot of the Powerpuff Girls, Powerpuff Girls Z. For those of you who have never heard of Powerpuff Girls Z, it's a magical girl anime, and it's quite different from the original show, and it takes a lot of creative liberties. For example, the main girls are regular humans, and they aren't even sisters, and they gain their powers rather than being born with them, and they're all aged up from 5 years old to 13 years old, and the professor also has a biological son. If you want to check the show out, the only place I've been able to find this show is uploads on YouTube, which sometimes get taken down, and on piracy sites. The anime is kind of obscure, but I recently found that quite a bit more people know about it than I initially thought. I have such a strange relationship with the show. I found out that this version of the Powerpuff Girls existed back in the summer between my 2nd and 3rd grade when I saw my older siblings watching it on YouTube. It's been my favorite show since I was 8 years old, and even though I don't watch it much at all anymore, it still has a stronger hold on me than any piece of media ever has before or since. I've made a lot of different fanfictions of this show over the years. Some I'm more proud of than others, but that's a story for another time, and I've currently created a new fanfiction for the show. The fanfiction itself is kinda like Dino Bunny's Mario lore in the sense that it's so far off canon that it might as well be an original story. I call it Hexagon because, just like most people who make Powerpuff fanfiction, I made the Rowdy Rough Boys main characters as well, and I didn't want to have to keep saying the Powerpuff Girls and the Rowdy Rough Boys every time I reference their team. And if you're wondering why I went with the name Hexagon, it's because there are 6 main characters. Yeah, I'm clearly very creative. Before I started YouTube, I've been considering releasing the fanfiction to the internet, but I haven't really created a structured story for it, and right now it's just a bunch of scattered ideas of a vague overarching idea and a whole lot of side stuff. Even if I don't post the fanfiction itself, I'll probably talk about it in a future video. Hexagon is supposed to take place 4 years after the events of Powerpuff Girls Z, so now the characters are high school seniors at 17 years old, which is why Buttercup looks the way she does in this drawing. This piece was actually of her just waking up in the morning, reminiscing on the dream she just had the previous night. I didn't mention a lot of details in the description of the DeviantArt post for this piece, but ever since I've been doing digital art, I've been posting all of my pieces to a Google Slides presentation, and in the bio on the slide for this piece, I put a quote of what she's supposed to be thinking in this drawing. I've been wanting to redraw this one for a while, and I've been considering changing her pose so that she'd be looking at her phone scrolling through it or something, but I decided to keep the pose because I really like her tired expression, and the positioning of her just laying down, not really doing anything, gives the piece a much calmer feeling. The process of drawing her body shape took me an extremely long time, with half of the time being spent on figuring out how to draw the arms. I've never drawn muscles or abs before, so it was tricky but pretty fun to figure out. It took quite a bit of scrolling through Pinterest to find good references, though. For some reason, I tend to struggle with finding references for things I'm trying to draw. I really hope I'm not the only one. I was really glad to be able to fix her arm here because in the original, her arm was so weirdly, unrealistically, and awkwardly bent at the collarbone, and I drew her arms way too short, like it looks like she can barely reach her arms over her head, kinda like a little Einstein's character, and her gigantic head definitely didn't help the look. I really enjoyed drawing her pajamas, especially improving upon the way I originally drew them. The only thing I regret is that I ended up making her shorts a bit tighter than they were originally, and I think that they would have looked better and a lot more PJ-like if I made them looser like I did in the original piece. But I am glad that I fixed the drawstring so that it has actual width and depth, because that one-dimensional line was bugging me so much for way too long. I still tend to struggle with drawing hair, but I think that I was able to improve how it looks here, especially with the bangs. I think I could have done better with making the hair less geometrical, for lack of a better term, but a slight improvement is still an improvement. Little fun fact, when my mom found out I posted the original drawing to my DeviantArt, she freaked out and told me all my future employers would see it and not want to hire me because I drew a teenager in pajamas and used short shorts and showed off her stomach. She was really uptight about modesty and things as such. But anyways, despite posting what my mom thinks might as well be hentai on a public site, I was still able to land a retail job for a couple months before I decided to quit on my own terms, so looks like she was wrong. When it came to drawing the bedsheet wrinkles, I definitely could have done a much better job, especially when I shade it later on. I was getting really lazy at this part, which I really shouldn't have, and the wrinkles ended up looking pretty inconsistent, and it kind of looks more like a weird background design rather than a bedsheet. Now, something I didn't notice about the original drawing until I started drawing the phone in the redraw is that her earbuds don't have a plug, and the wire is directly connected to the phone, which makes it look like her phone came with built-in earbuds, so I made sure to fix that in the redraw. I also decided to add in a little detail where each separate earbud wire connects into one. I originally was going to trim down the lining stage to only show the lines that I succeeded on so this part wouldn't be so long, but I decided that it would be important to show the struggle. I used to be, and still sort of am, pretty insecure about how quickly other artists were able to get through the process of drawing seemingly so effortlessly, so I think it would be a good thing to show the process in full so that newer artists can see that even experienced artists struggle a lot. And the lining stage is definitely a stage that takes quite a bit of patience, and patience I did not have back in 2019. I used to try to get the lining stage over as quickly as possible, so mistakes are very visible, such as the lines being wobbly and there being quite a few unclean crosses between lines. It also doesn't help that I used to use a free mobile app on a touchscreen Chromebook before I got a laptop and a trackpad. The app I was using was Sony Sketch, and obviously, since I was using a touchscreen, there was no way to use pen pressure, and like most mobile drawing apps, Sketch didn't have a fancy stabilizer, so I was relying solely on the steadiness of my own hand, and as you can see, my hands are not very steady at all. This was also back when I used the same line weight for the entire line art, so I was glad to be able to fix that in the redraw. Sony Sketch actually shut down back in 2019, which disabled all its online features, but since I could still use it as a drawing app because I already had it downloaded, I continued to create drawings with it until the end of 2020 when my garbage Chromebook factory resetted itself or something, and therefore I permanently lost Sketch and all of the original files of the drawings I made with it. I actually didn't really enjoy drawing with Sketch. I used to use Ibis Paint, which had so many more features than Sketch, but Ibis Paint started having a lot of weird and frequent glitches, which I'm pretty sure was caused by the dog water Chromebook I was using, and it basically became unusable, so I had to switch to Sketch instead. Even though I didn't like using Sketch, I was still sad to see it go, and I did have quite a few scraps and unfinished drawings on there, which I will never be able to recover since my Chromebook got reset, and I would give anything to be able to get them back. I was really excited to start on the coloring stage. The colors in the original look really muddy, and there are also areas of shading that I didn't fully fill in. It's only noticeable if you zoom in on it, but it just feels very unprofessional for lack of a better term. At the time that I made the original drawing, I was going through this phase where for some reason I would switch between using a darker shade of the same hue to shade skin and changing the hue to shade until I officially set myself on changing the hue. As you can see, this was one of the drawings where I used the same hue to shade and the colors suffer for it. When it comes to coloring eyes, it took me a long time to develop my own style. I think I still have a bit of a way to go, but I like where I'm at right now. An effect I really like doing with the eyes is making all these little white dots and turning them slightly transparent to give the eyes a sort of a snow globe look. I don't know if I'll keep this look in years to come, but for now I really like it. As for the clothes, really shading in general, but especially the clothes, I think I haven't really improved as much as I feel I should have. Even when it comes to drawing how the clothes should set and fold on a character's body, I feel like I've really been slacking. It's really something I need to pay more attention to and actively search out references so that I can improve. I had color picked the base color of the clothes from the original with the intention of using different colors for shading, but I was really disappointed to find that the shading colors here ended up being almost identical to the colors in the original, so that's also something I need to work on. Something I really wanted to improve from the original was the hair. I still very much have trouble with drawing and shading hair, and I have very much to learn, but back then I had next to no idea what I was doing, especially with whatever was going on with these highlights. I used to always struggle when it came to placing highlights in the hair, and sometimes I would even just completely leave them out, but I think that this time around I did a lot better. It's definitely not perfect, but it at least has some sort of coherent placement. Even though I can't exactly replicate it, I at least have a bit of understanding of how shading hair is supposed to work, which is more than I can say for how I used to approach hair. I have a long way to go with hair, especially with certain styles, but I hope I'll be able to improve soon. One thing I really like is when artists are able to incorporate their watermarks into their art as if it were an actual part of the art piece, which is what I did here in putting my watermark as part of the album cover on the phone screen. I actually remember not long after I finished the original piece, I was really upset at myself for not putting my watermark on the phone screen, so I was glad to be able to rectify that here. The bedsheet was definitely the weakest part of the shading, especially this lighting effect where I used an airbrush to make one side darker and the other side lighter. It looks really dusty, especially on the side that I made darker, and it's also really hard to see the shading on the parts that I airbrushed. The harsh, thick black lines also don't really help how the shading and the bedsheet look. I did the effect in the redraw as well, but I made it look a lot less harsh, so it's a lot less overbearing and makes the bedsheets look a lot nicer and softer. I also really like that I was able to make the pillow look a lot fluffier, as it looks really flat in the original for some reason. I think that overall, I could have done better with shading the bedsheet as I left a lot of flat space, but I'm still learning and there's still time for me to grow. This last thing I'm doing is going over the lines with color. This is something I've only recently started doing with my art pieces, and I think it's very beneficial to the overall look of the drawing, especially where the colors are lighter. I guess I just don't really like how harsh black lines look against light colors, and I like how soft the color lines make the drawing look. And here's the finished drawing. I made a couple of off-screen edits like the shading on the hair, and I also went over the colors for the line art on the skin because I wasn't liking how the bold red looked. And this is the side-by-side. I was actually really nervous to do this redraw because I was scared that I wouldn't show much growth. However, comparing the two, I can see that I've definitely improved, especially with anatomy. I also really like the detail I added to the phone of putting an actual playlist album on the screen rather than just a crooked musical note logo that I did in the original. And a little fun fact Easter egg is that all the song titles listed here are actual songs I made. I sometimes make songs in my free time, however most of my songs, including the ones listed here, are all mostly in their concept demo stage. The only song listed here that's close to any sort of completion is Serenity. I've been planning on getting into my experience with music as another video, so if you want to know more about these songs, stick around on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and with that, I'll see you soon.